Canada's Auditor General, Karen Hogan, joins me now. Auditor General, good to see you. It's our first chance to speak, so congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Let's begin with the shipbuilding audit. This is kind of like a broken record for Canadians on defense procurement. Can you explain why almost all of these major shipbuilding projects are so backed up, and who's to blame for that?
So, in our audit on the national shipbuilding strategy, we looked at whether or not the government was managing the contract in a way so that the ships would arrive in a timely fashion. And what we found is that there were delays, and those delays were, I believe, as a shared responsibility between both the government and the shipyards. What we saw were delays and uncertainty in sort of the design and needing to refine that, which then led to delays in production. And once the first ship, which is a really critical one to get built, is delayed, there's a bit of a ripple effect on all the other ships. The shipyards also had not yet achieved their target state, and target state is a really important metric to make sure that you don't deal with the sort of boom and bust of the shipbuilding industry, and that there's a consistent flow in order to manage the delivery of ships that were needed under the
All right,
strategy.
only two of the four new vessels scheduled for delivery in January you found of last year were actually delivered, and both were late. How concerned are you that old vessels will have to be, in fact, retired before replacement vessels are ready in some of these key procurement programs?
So I am quite concerned because there was as you said, lots of delays, and the department did take some action during our audit in order to be able to realign and hopefully put the strategy back on track. But there's very little wiggle room, and some of that wiggle room likely was eaten up by some of the delays on the government side and the shipyard side because of the pandemic. And so the government really does need to stay focused now on monitoring how that strategy goes forward, so that further delays, aren't suffered, because interim capabilities will only last so long.
Okay, let's turn to drinking water and First Nations communities. What's it going to take for the federal government to finally resolve these problems with drinking water in Canadian First Nations communities?
I have to tell you, I'm rather disheartened by the whole situation with the drinking water. I think it's completely unacceptable, and I'm sure that anyone who reads our audit report would agree that in Canada in 2021 there are so many First Nations communities that don't have access to safe drinking water. What we saw as some of the reasons for the government not meeting its commitment to raise all long-term drinking water advisories by March of this year was a few things. We saw a funding formula that was quite outdated, almost 30 years since it has been looked at, and that really makes sure that the First Nations have the adequate resources. And right now, the financial resources aren't meeting their needs. And you saw that by operators who, they can't really retain skilled operators for the water systems, because right now they're earning about 30% less than their counterparts. There is that, and then there's also sort of the legislative framework that's needed there. There was an act that was put in place, but the
Right.
guidelines that really like put the act into tangible terms for people haven't been worked on yet. So there's a few things that they need to work on to find
Okay.
long-term
Let,
solutions.
let's finish. There were five reports today. I'm dealing with three of them tonight. Let's talk about rail safety. Transport Canada has implemented a whole bunch of new oversight measures, but are they working?
Well, I think that's exactly what we found in our audit, that we were pleased to see that they had made progress on the recommendations that we made in 2013. So this audit was a follow-up of the audit we did 8 years ago. And we found that they took extra action. So they were doing more inspections and following up on the corrective measures that rail companies were taking. They actually increased some of their audits on the safety management systems in railway companies. But where it fell short, and it's a really important thing, is that they weren't measuring whether or not all this increased activity was actually having an impact on rail safety. And if you're going to invest that much time and effort and money, it's important to know whether those resources are
I guess,
actually
yeah.
making a difference.
Okay, just to quickly finish off, I always ask auditors this final question. Is your office satisfied with the level of cooperation and commitment to action that you receive from the government from these audits?
We are satisfied with the interaction that we had during the audits with all the departments that we audited. Absolutely, I do have to say that I'm concerned by the length of time that it's taken to take action on rail safety, and honestly, very saddened by the state of lack of access to drinking water. But there's a goodwill there, and it's time to really take action to look at sort of those root causes and whether or not the government's actions are making a real difference in the lives of Canadians.
All right, Canada's Auditor General, Karen Hogan. Thank you for your time this evening. Good to talk to you.
Thank you. You too.